Hello and welcome to the Arbitration Conversation. So in this conversation, we're going to be talking about how you can use dispute resolution, online dispute resolution in particular, and ADR also, for deciding issues regarding platforms and when someone should be kicked off of a platform like Facebook or Twitter, like we've seen with most recently President Trump. And I'm super delighted because we have an expert. I've been reading his work for a long time, and he's just got some great thoughts. So Rory Van Loo. Mr. Van Loo, he's a professor at Boston University. He has his JD from Harvard, his PhD from Yale, so that's pretty good. And he's also just a very nice person. So I'm very happy to have him here. So Rory, thank you.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So I ran across your article, one of your articles, many articles on SSRN earlier actually last year, and it was Federal Rules of Platform Procedure, and the Chicago Law Review is where it's going to be. I guess, is it out yet or forthcoming?
Forthcoming, yes.
Forthcoming. Well, and it's a really interesting article because it looks at sort of platform procedures, right? And how we might sort of regulate in some way, perhaps, be it private or public, and also looking at the application of dispute resolution. So first of all, how would you describe your article sort of in a nutshell?
Yeah, so the article is really a response to what I perceive as one of the most important private dispute resolution systems in the world. And that's the internal processes created by Google, Facebook, Amazon, and other large tech platforms. And they raise, first of all, some really important stakes, right? I mean, Facebook has the ability to cut people off from their social network and from their support, both financially and emotionally in life, especially in an era of social distancing. And Google can really determine with its dispute resolution processes whether or not somebody's reputation is dragged through the mud. Amazon also, with its decisions to suspend accounts, can really just bankrupt a small business overnight, and with it send a family or several families into poverty. So the stakes are really high for these systems, and they're also quite elaborate. In the early days, they were trying to avoid getting too involved in dispute resolution. They kind of wanted users to work it out. And then over time, they realized, wow, we should probably become more active in this because there's some really tough issues going on. And it's important for retaining users and customers to have effective dispute resolution. This is something that's well known in other literatures, especially in business law and other areas. So I mean, corporate America is very aware that dispute resolution pays. And so, and not to mention the public pressure on these companies to kind of start cleaning up their ecosystems. And so this paper really tries to capture those stakes and then draws an analogy to credit card companies and credit report agencies, both of which have some kind of federal laws that require those entities to take specific steps as they're resolving disputes. So for example, if you have a credit card and there's a line item on your bill that you disagree with, so you didn't get the actual product or you never made that purchase, then by law, they have to take that off of your bill until they investigate it and give both sides the chance to kind of state their case and so on. In contrast, platforms have none of these restrictions. And so what I do in this paper is I propose a set of federal rules, kind of not exactly modeled after the federal rules of platform procedure, but in some ways motivated by that lawmaking effort, drawing the analogy that judges can't just go and deprive people of their liberty or property or other important things in life without following a certain set of procedures, nor should these large platforms given these incredibly high stakes.
Right, right. I mean, this has been in the news, of course, most recently, as we look at the power that these platforms have. And another thing, with respect to your paper and some of your ideas, I like how it ties in with regulatory design, but also dispute system design. Could you explain, sort of from your view, how you see dispute resolution as being part of sort of the regulatory design that you're proposing?
Yes, so my proposal, although it has this public component, which is one of the things that makes this a little bit different from a lot of the literature in alternative dispute resolution that might touch on similar issues. So I'm proposing laws be written that would require large platforms to take certain dispute resolution steps. At the same time, I still leave a big nexus for private ordering to fill the mandates of those laws. So, for example, one of the potential interventions that I discuss is the possibility of having, say, a third-party entity required of these largest platforms to serve as a kind of appeals body, right? So Facebook did this on its own volition, and the the component here for dispute resolution design is really taking a step back and thinking about how all these pieces would ideally fit together such that the users have a say. There's an external check. All of these elements of procedural justice, if you will, giving people a voice, allowing neutral decision makers and so on, is very much a component of how I went about thinking about this. And also, I just want to say that I provide a lot of ideas, such as just requiring a human being to become involved upon appeal when there's something big done, like taking down a major account, for example, on social media. Uh, Everything from that to this say appeals body, but it's more of a menu of options. And I also frame it as a potential list of possibilities for even private companies that just want to improve their dispute resolution on their own.
Right, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, they build goodwill by improving the way they resolve disputes. Could you go into a little bit more detail, perhaps, of describing how this Facebook review board works, just for those that aren't familiar?
Yes, so Facebook donated a lot of money, over $100 million, into basically some independent fund, to pay for over 40 judges, essentially private judges, to be hired. A lot of law professors, former Nobel Peace Prize winner, and others, to serve as kind of appeals body to make decisions about content takedowns, especially. So if a user has, say, their post taken down or their their account suspended, in theory, they can then submit an appeal after they've exhausted Facebook's internal processes. They can submit an appeal to this body, and then it has the authority to require Facebook to put that post back up. And so this was, as far as I can tell, an unprecedented step for a private company to say, we're going to set up this private appeals body that really has the authority to make us do something that to make us change our action that we had thought was the best course.
How do you think this should come into play? So, what about when we have questions of national security, like most recently, and use of social media in ways that could be damaging to public safety? Do you have any recommendations in those cases? Are they different than sort of the usual, like you said, it can definitely impact someone's finances on eBay or Amazon if they are eliminated. But what about sort of when there is this question of national security at play?
I think it's very fair and probably wise to carve out exceptions where we might want alternative processes, both accelerated and maybe with more public involvement. So the public involvement I envision in my current proposal comes from both the first legal requirement to have certain processes in place, and second, the continuing oversight by some administrative agency, a regulator of some sort, a federal regulator ideally. And then third, appeals to public courts, right? And so with that model in mind, you can imagine that the regulatory oversight component might have a more quick button or accelerated process for intervening in cases of national emergency or other pressing issues.
Right. Well, and I love this because it really something I've always looked at is sort of the functional analysis and also thinking about, fitting the tech, fitting the dispute resolution process to sort of the fuss or the problem at hand. Would you recommend, and also in your paper, the way you describe it, would it be purely online, or do you think there should be in-person dispute resolution built in at any point?
I don't take a strong stance about in-person versus remote. I would tend to think that keeping it remote would lower the costs and increase access in ways that would be beneficial. I should also say that I am inspired by and build on your work and Colin Rule's work in the paper. And I think there's a lot of persuasive arguments made that we really need to be moving more online, or at least providing a really robust online option here.
Well, I have to say, your work, though, in regulatory design is just really great and important. I don't know if you have any, do you think some of your ideas might actually come to fruition with the new administration and thinking about how we might propose regulations in this area, especially since it's been kind of top of mind?
I'm generally optimistic, actually, about the possibility of progress really in a lot of these areas. And also, I saw that the European Union recently came out with model legislation, and it drafted a set of potential laws that have a good chance of being passed, and some of which actually reflect some of the ideas in here. To be clear, I don't have any sense of whether anybody looked at my proposals, and even the timeline I'm not even totally sure about. I just know that I saw this recently, and one of the ideas is to have a private or an external appeals body that's independent of the public court system. And so I could imagine that between us already doing this in the United States and other industries like finance, and Europe doing it in tech, that the case for something like what I'm talking about here could be more straightforward than it would seem at first blush. And when I say that, I mean, I think most people, when you talk about disputes that they might have with a large tech company, they wouldn't think that it's the realm of the law, that like, why would the law get involved, until you start pointing out that this is the type of thing that we've done elsewhere.
Absolutely. No, this is really great work, and thank you for your contribution. It's really, really fascinating. So for everyone listening, please check out his article. As I said, it's forthcoming in the Chicago Law Review, and there's currently a draft, I guess it is, on SSRN. So please check it out. Great work. Professor Van Loo, thank you for taking time. It's always awesome to talk with you.
Thank you very much. It's great to see you and talk to you as well.